Hello, biology buddies. I hope you are all doing well and that you and your families are staying safe. This is lesson 3 in the Unit B3 Infection and Response unit, and we're going to be talking about the immune response today. So in lesson 1, we learned about pathogens, the 4 different types of pathogens. In lesson 2, we learned about different diseases, the 7 diseases you need to know for the AQA GCSE specification, as well as how these pathogens are spread and what we can do to reduce the spread. In lesson 3 today, what we're going to be looking at is what happens in your body once those pathogens get in. How does it defend itself? So our outcomes are to recall the different parts of the immune system, describe how the body prevents pathogens from getting in the first place, describe the steps of the immune response, and we're going to talk about both the primary response and the secondary response. And finally, you need to be able to explain what immunity is and how it comes about. And that's going to link to the next lesson, which is on vaccines. And vaccines provide immunity, so those tie together nicely. To start off with, most pathogens need to get inside your body, usually your blood, before they can start to reproduce and then cause disease within you. So the human body has a number of different defenses or barriers that will stop those pathogens from getting in. And I'd like you to take a moment here and just try and think of all the different ways you can think that stops pathogens from actually getting into your body. The pathogens outside your body, what can your body do to stop it from getting in? Here are some that I've come up with. So skin is a barrier to entry, hairs and mucus, your tears, and your stomach acid. Let's have a look at these in a little more detail. Your skin is a physical barrier. That means it's going to actually physically prevent them from getting in. That is going to stop pathogens from getting in. If you have a cut in your skin, then the physical barrier has been broken, and that's why you can get an infection if you have a cut in your skin and the blood's exposed. But your skin also secretes some antimicrobial substances, so that is some chemicals that will help to kill some microbes that are on your skin. Hairs and mucus, if you think really simply about your nose, for example, you have hair and mucus in there. What the mucus does is it sticks pathogens together, and the hairs trap dust and that mucus that might have the stuff trapped in it. So dust is one way that pathogens can get into your body. Remember, bacteria, viruses, spores from a fungus, all these things are so tiny that they can actually be sitting on the dust. If we think about hairs and mucus, we can also think about things like the ciliated epithelial cells and the goblet cells that are also inside your body. So pretty much every hole in your body is going to have hairs and mucus to try and stop pathogens from getting in. If we think about your trachea, that's your air tube that leads down from your mouth. So this is your trachea. Inside the trachea, the hole is called the lumen. And along the sides there, you're going to have 2 different types of cells. One, which are goblet cells that are going to secrete mucus. I'm going to do nice green mucus here. And you will also have cells called ciliated epithelial cells, which essentially have little hair-like structures or cilia coming off of them. So this is in your airway, in your trachea. It goes from your mouth and your nose down to the bronchi and then to the bronchioles and the alveoli. We saw that in B2, so this comes up in unit B2. And what the goblet cells do is they will secrete mucus to trap dust and pathogens. Remember, secrete is just a fancy biology word for release. And then your ciliated epithelial cells basically waft. They move the hairs, go from the bottom up, bottom up, bottom up, and these will waft the mucus up the trachea and into your mouth, where essentially you could swallow it, and then it gets destroyed by the stomach acid, which we'll come to in a second, or if you're gross, spitting it out onto the ground. Please don't do that, that's gross. So there's another example of hairs and mucus. Your goblet cells that secrete mucus in your trachea, and your ciliated epithelial cells, which have little hair-like structures called cilia. They're going to waft the mucus and the dust up out of the trachea to keep your alveoli, those are the air sacs where gas exchange happens, nice and clean. We also have tears. This doesn't just mean crying, it means the liquid that's in your eyes, and essentially what that does is keep the eyes clean. The eyes are another hole into the body, so it's going to wash out the dust, and again, just like the skin, it's going to have in it some antimicrobial substances, so some chemicals that will kill microbes. Last one is stomach acid, and your stomach acid is HCl, or hydrochloric acid. You would have already seen this in Unit B2 when you talked about the optimal pH of different enzymes in the body. So you have enzymes, biological catalysts that are in your stomach to help digest food, and their optimal pH is going to be quite a bit lower than it would be for enzymes that are in your small intestine, for example. And the reason for that is you have hydrochloric acid in your stomach. It is secreted by cells in the stomach, and that's there to kill pathogens. So those are the barriers, the things that are going to stop the pathogens from actually getting in. If/when pathogens make it past these barriers, so for example, they survive the stomach acid, or there's a cut in the skin, or they get in through your nose, or you breathe them in and they're not trapped by your mucus and then wafted up by your ciliated epithelials, pathogens will get in. What happens then is your immune system, and your immune system is going to kick into effect. I like to think of the immune system as your own private little army that's constantly on guard inside your body. It's patrolling your blood vessels, it's controlling your lymphatic system, it's constantly looking for things that aren't supposed to be there, and then attacking those and destroying them and figuring out how to get rid of them. Now, when we say things that are not supposed to be there, the key word is antigens. Okay, if you remember back to the very first lesson, we harped on the word antigens. And the antigens are the structures that are on the outside of the cells. So your immune system, as it's going through, is going to be checking all of the cells, and the cells that make up your own body are going to have specific antigens on them, and the immune system is going to know that that's part of its body, so they're going to leave those alone. If that doesn't happen, you get really nasty autoimmune diseases, and that's where the immune system starts attacking the body itself because it's not recognizing the antigens. But most of the time, in a functioning body, in a healthy body, the immune system is going to be checking the antigens, and if it runs up against an unknown antigen, so something that is foreign, it will start to attack it. Okay? If the pathogen gets into your body, it's important to remember that before it can really start causing disease, it needs to start reproducing. In the case of bacteria, we saw that that is going to be binary fission. And that's where the bacteria are going to be making exact copies of themselves every 20 minutes or so. So very quickly you can go from a low number of bacteria to a really big number of bacteria, or a large number of bacteria, and then those bacteria are releasing waste products. So when you have a lot of them, that's what's going to cause the disease. If it's a virus and it gets in, it's going to infect the first cell. It's going to trick the cell into making a whole bunch of copies of the virus. Those are going to burst out of the cell, destroying it, and go on to infect other things. So essentially, once the pathogen gets in, the clock starts ticking because they're going to be reproducing really quickly, and the more of them there are, the more damage they can do. Your immune system is really complicated. GCSE is a massive oversimplification of what you learn about at A level, which is an oversimplification of what you learn about if you do biology at undergraduate at university, which is an oversimplification of what you would do if you specialize in medical research or the immune system and things like that. We're going to keep it super simple, and we're just going to be talking about white blood cells. We're going to talk about 3 different white blood cells, but they're all white blood cells. White blood cells do 3 really important things. They engulf and destroy pathogens. Do not say eat. You won't get the marks on the exam. They create antibodies. We talked about those briefly in a previous lesson. We'll go into more detail. And they can create antitoxins. If you get an exam question that says, talk about the role of white blood cells in the body, you're going to want to hit all three of these things. The one that people forget the most commonly is create antitoxins. So engulf and destroy, antibody, antitoxin. You need to memorize those three things. First one is engulf and destroy, and the special name for this is a process called phagocytosis. White blood cells called phagocytes take pathogens inside their cell, that's the engulf, and then they destroy them using enzymes. The whole thing's called phagocytosis. If you don't remember the word phagocyte, that's okay. On every exam question that I've seen, they'll just accept the words white blood cell instead. But particularly if you're looking at doing A-level or are interested in the immune system, I would learn the word phagocyte. Let's draw what this process might look like. So let's put a little bacteria over here. And then we will have our white blood cell. We'll remember that those are the bad guys and these are the good guys. And what the white blood cell is going to do is it's actually going to change its shape and go around the bacteria in this case. It will close that hole up. And put the bacteria inside a membrane, inside a lysosome. It will then use special digestive enzymes and destroy that pathogen. So it completely kills it and breaks it up into little pieces. At A level, you'll see that this process then leads to the white blood cell actually taking the antigens and putting them on the outside so other white blood cells can learn what's going on. But for GCSE, we just need to remember that phagocytosis means that the white blood cell, the phagocyte, engulfs, which is this part here, and then destroys the pathogen, killing it completely. So that is one of the functions of white blood cells, engulf and destroy. Let's have a look at the next one, which is to create antibodies. There's another type of white blood cell called leukocyte, and the job of a leukocyte is to mass produce antibodies. Antibodies are proteins that are being made. So if we think back to Unit B1, we could say that leukocytes are going to have a lot of ribosomes. And the antibodies can bind or attach to specific antigens, the structures on the outside of the cell membrane of the pathogen. Okay, because it is a Y shape, it can attach to two different pathogens at the same time, but it can only attach to one specific shape. This is similar to the idea that you saw in B2 with enzymes and substrates. The active site of each enzyme can only bind to the complementary shape, the matching shape of the substrate. It's the similar idea here. Each antibody can only attach to the matching antigen. Let's draw what that might look like. So again, let's draw our pathogen. We'll make it a little bit bigger this time. And I'm going to give it some square-shaped antigens on the outside. We'll remind ourselves that this is the bad guy. And then our antibodies are Y-shaped. It's not great. And at the end of each, they have a complementary shape which can fit onto the antigen. So this is the antibody, and that is the antigen. We could have a different antibody that doesn't fit. So we'll make a triangle this time, and that one does not fit. And if we think back to lesson 1, every strain or species of pathogen, so for example, salmonella will have a specific shaped antigen, whereas gonorrhea, which is also a bacteria, doesn't have the same shaped antigen. So you're going to need different antibodies for those. Each leukocyte is going to make antibodies for one specific antigen. If it's a new pathogen, if it hasn't encountered it before, one of the reasons people get ill is that it takes a while for the immune system to figure out how to make the correct antibody. You don't need to worry about that until you get to A-level biology, and even then it's an oversimplification of the process. We just need to remember that the reason you get ill if the pathogen's in your body for the first time is it takes a while for your body how to figure out how to make that antibody. As we said, because antibodies are Y-shaped, they can actually grab 2 pathogens at the same time. So you can end up with a really big clump of pathogens because the antibodies, once they've been figured out how to made and mass-produced, will clump a whole bunch of pathogens together. That really simplifies the process for the phagocytes, for the white blood cells that engulf and destroy, because they can come along and instead of killing one pathogen at a time, engulf and destroy a whole number of them at the same time. So if we wanted to draw that, it might look something like this. We've got a pathogen there, and then an antibody grabbing it, and then another pathogen over here, and then that one's being grabbed, and then you have another one over here, etc., etc., etc. So you can see how with the antibodies you can actually collect a whole bunch of pathogens together at the same time, and then your white blood cell comes along and can engulf the whole thing and destroy a whole bunch of them at the same time. Because antibodies attach to the outside of the pathogen, some antibodies against viruses can actually stop the virus from injecting its genetic material into the cell. So it's another useful way for antibodies to help combat against pathogens. The last one is antitoxins. White blood cells can secrete antitoxins. We need to remember back in lesson 1 that bacteria, it's just the bacteria, can release toxins, which are the things that make us ill. The toxins are toxic to our cells and tissues. And what happens is the antitoxins that are being released by the white blood cells attach to these toxins and essentially make them harmless. So they're not toxic to us anymore, so it will help to stop the disease from progressing. The last and really important thing is the memory cells, okay? Memory cells are super important when it comes to immunity, super important when it comes to vaccines. They're special leukocytes, the white blood cells that make antibodies, and they live for a long time and can essentially remember how to make the antibody for a specific pathogen. So that memory cell, after the body successfully fought off a pathogen, will stay in the lymphatic system or the circulatory system and just sits there waiting for that pathogen to come back. And if it does, the memory cell remembers how to make the antibody, which means that you can fight off the disease much faster. You can kill that pathogen much faster because you don't need to wait around trying to figure out how to make the antibody. This then makes you immune. So when we talk about immunity, we're talking about the memory cells, okay? If the pathogen ever comes back into the body, as we said, the memory cell remembers how to make the antibody. You don't have that lag, that time delay where the immune system's trying to figure out how to make the correct antibody. It just starts getting made right away, clumps up all the pathogens, and then the phagocytes can come along and engulf and destroy them. This happens so quickly, and it keeps the population of pathogens so low that you never actually even feel ill. So you have the pathogen in your body, but there's not enough of them to make you feel ill, and before they can reproduce enough to make you ill, the memory cells have recognized them, kicked into effect, and trigger what's known as the secondary immune response, which kills it really quickly. To recap the whole thing and go through the stages, the primary response is when you encounter a pathogen for the first time. So you've never had this pathogen in your body before. The immune system doesn't recognize it. Pathogen gets into the body, starts reproducing really quickly, and then if it's a bacteria, is releasing toxins. If it's a virus, starts injecting its genetic material into your cells, etc., which causes the disease. Some of the phagocytes will come along and kill a few of the pathogens, but is only doing one at a time. Then your leukocytes, your white blood cells that make antibodies, figure out how to make the correct antibody, the one that has the matching shape to fit the antigen. You start making tons of those antibodies. They stick all the pathogens together. They stop the viruses from getting into the cells. Your white blood cells, your phagocytes come along and engulf and destroy all of them. And then, super important bit, the memory cells remember how to make the antibody for that pathogen. That then makes you immune. The next time the pathogen enters the body, that's called the secondary response. And what happens there is you can skip a whole bunch of the steps because the memory cells figure out or remember how to make the antibody really quickly, start mass producing the antibody, all the pathogens get clumped together, the phagocytes come along and destroy it, job done. So immunity is super important. Next lesson when we talk about vaccines, you are going to think of the vaccine as a practice run for the primary response. So that allows your body, the first time it encounters the real pathogen, to actually kick into the secondary response, and that makes you immune. To recap, we called the different parts of the immune system. We had phagocytes, we had leukocytes, and we had memory cells. We had antibodies, we had antitoxins. Remember, the antigens are on the bad guys, those are on the pathogens. Describe how the body prevents pathogens from getting into the body, into the blood. We talked about a bunch of different things. You need to have a few of those memorized to come up on a test or an exam. Describe the steps of the immune response. We've been through both the primary and the secondary, and then explain what immunity is. And remember, when we talk about immunity, what we're really talking about is those memory cells. Okay, I hope that this has been clear for you. The work for you after this lesson is going to be a little bit different from the others. You are going to make a cartoon. You're going to make a cartoon, and I will put the templates and the instructions up in the notes for you. And with that cartoon, you are going to describe and explain the primary immune response. So step by step, using some cartoons. Be creative, and hopefully that'll help you remember if you have to answer these questions on an exam. Okay, thank you very much, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.